Well, good morning and welcome to the new week. It is Monday, the February 27th, 2023, and I'm Pastor Woods of Grace Lutheran Church, and this is the weekly devotion. Today's title, Being. I'm doing this, of course, in the spirit of our Red Letter Challenge that's going on. Now, of course, we've already started the Red Letter Challenge. This first week has been all about being. But what pops up into my head or into my mind is this idea of presence or substance. I've mentioned at the Wednesday service last week rather, that Trish and I have traveled to Alaska a couple of years ago. It was our great joy to be able to go finally after all these years of dreaming about it. Being there allowed us to experience the wondrous places that we'd only seen on TV or read in magazines and so on. Being there, however, allowed us to experience it, to be present there. We got to feel the crunch of ice under our feet as we walked on the glacier. We tasted water that was melted from centuries-old ice. We felt the cold radiating from the glacier all around us. We got to touch the rocks that were trapped on the ice and saw the deep blues. It's so deep blues, and we got to see the waterfalls that fell into these pits that were just seemed like they're endless. We'd hear the cracking of the ice all around us as it moved imperceptibly. Being there in person is so much more interesting than seeing it on TV or reading about it. We got to experience its grandeur. I could say the same thing about being a grandpa. First time grandpa. I've heard countless reports over all my years of what it's like to be a grandparent and how awesome that is to have grandkids. I've heard some jokingly say, if I'd have known how good grandkids would be, I would have skipped over the kids and gone to the grandkids. Well, now I have one, and I can say definitely it's a game changer. Being grandpa means I get to hold my grandson, little Caden. I get to enjoy his little milestones, like cooing and making faces and reaching to the dog, or hearing the dog bark and wincing at it and kicking his little feet like a frog. And eventually I'll get to hear his first words like "Grandpa." Wouldn't that be something? For example. Eventually, his first steps will come along, and there'll be other milestones and more discoveries of the world, and all of it will be amazing to watch. Just being with him makes the moments very special. He doesn't have to do anything except just be who he is, because I love him as my grandson, and I think he's amazing. Just being my grandson is all it takes. Just being is the key to it all. Of course, being is how we describe ourselves, isn't it? Human beings. We are present. We are here. And that's exactly what Jesus became for us. He came here, be present with us, became a human being, God in the flesh. He interacted with people and welcomed little children, ate and hung out with sinners, talked with his neighbors, celebrated Passover with his family and his disciples. He laughed with them. He cried with them. He may have even told a joke with them. All of those things are part of being human being. Later on, we also know what Jesus did as a human being. And that's where we come into Lent. And that's what we're looking for on Good Friday. 700 years before Jesus took on the incarnation, 700 years before Jesus ever went to the cross, Isaiah 53 told the world that Jesus, as a human being, would do what he would do as he entered into humanity with his humanity. Likely many of us have heard these words, right? From verse 5, that's where I'll start. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray, right? Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted. He did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, as a sheep before his shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of this generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit found in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offering and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his land. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors, for you and me. And we hear in 2 Corinthians 5:21 backs us up. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You see, Jesus as a human being took upon himself our sin. In him he bore the punishment that those sins deserve. Jesus experienced the pain of the scourge by being here with us. He experienced the abuse of the soldiers who mocked him and beat him, the injustice of his trials. He was declared innocent by Pilate, and still it was allowed for Barabbas to put aside, for Jesus to take the place of a true rebel and then die, as a rebel would deserve. He experienced slow, agonizing need to breathe as his body began to slowly decline on the cross. And as a human being does, he died. This, however, for me, is where it all gets interesting, because we know that Jesus only stayed in the tomb 3 days. You see, Jesus rose from the dead, and he was present with his disciples after his resurrection. Human beings will be in heaven with Jesus. That's the promise. Human beings who have that faith and that connection with Jesus. Being alive after one has died is something that is promised to all of us. And we can only imagine, as the song says, what it is to be in heaven. Human beings, we may imagine the experience of being there, present in heaven, being in God's presence, for that matter, being in heaven, feeling like feeling the fabric of those robes of righteousness over our very human skin, resurrected skin. I wonder what that will feel like. Will there be body odor in heaven? What will heaven smell like? Incense, spring flowers? Who knows? What will it be like to hear the sounds of the great multitude? And what would it be like to feel your toes on golden streets? Ever thought of that? What will we actually look like? Where in a place where sin no longer ruins us? I have so many questions. I'm so curious about all of it. I know some of you have expressed those questions too. But the promise is that we will be there. And that's the important piece, right? All that matters is the promise of being with Jesus. It all starts with that. It always does. So the Red Letter Challenge is a tool to put us in touch with Jesus, to be with Jesus, to know Jesus. Within it is a chance to get back to the fundamentals and the basic building blocks of our faith. That's why we're doing this, to put us more into that connection, to integrate ourselves more into what God is giving us. It all sounds easy until one starts to try and put them into practice, right? Because our sin gets in the way. But the first step is always to be present, and that's why the book starts there. Now this week, in this challenge, being present, the first week, is to abide in God's Word, for example. Not just visit it, but to linger in it, to be present in it. But the challenge is just to first read it, right? And this week there's a challenge to pray. Be yourselves. Use common language. Just be yourself before the Lord. Have a conversation with Him. He loves you. He wants to talk to you. And it's the greatest tool you have in your arsenal as a Christian. And worship is also a challenge. Worship is not just a place or a specific time, but it's every day. It's every moment for someone who's connected to God, right? And everything we do, whether in word or deed, is done to the glory of God. That's the goal, right? So worship is a lifestyle as well as a time on Sunday morning, a time with family and a time in solitude. A devotional life is next. The challenge, of course, is to put the Lord first, to say no to good things that are out there in order to make time for the best thing, which is Jesus. Learning to say no is often hard, right? From here, we are encouraged to fast, to let something go for a little while. We're encouraged to have good old-fashioned fun. That's another challenge. Sometimes it's hard to do when you're busy. We are encouraged to take time on the Sabbath, to take a moment with the Lord. After all, God took a day to enjoy his creation. In fact, I've always said it's the wondrous thing is he took the very first full day of humanity to hang out with him. He made it a point to be with him. The Sabbath is unique, and it is all deliberately um, and consciously designed for us to mingle with our Creator. But being is harder than it sounds, right? Showing up seems to be the main thing in this challenge. But when we show up, we experience things like grandchildren, like the grandeur, the natural grandeur around us, maybe a little fun or joy. And with each desire we want to go back as much as possible to experience more of such wonders. I can't wait to see my grandson again. And I look hopefully to go see more wonders on the planet when we go hiking again. Being allows us to know everything much more fully than simply hearing about it or wondering about it or imagining it. I pray that we meet this challenge well, to be in the Lord Jesus. I'm Pastor Woods. Thanks for being with me this morning. I pray that this week blesses you, and I pray that the Red Letter Challenge blesses you, and that as we walk together through it, we grow together. But I pray today that you have a good week for now, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So Grandpa is signing off. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.